By 2026, Britain could face the greatest housing collapse in modern history. Millions of families who once felt secure in their homes may soon find eviction letters on their doorsteps. Mortgage rates are soaring, bills are relentless, and the foundations of stability are cracking beneath everyday people. The warning signs are everywhere: empty savings, growing debt, and a government running out of options. This isn't a distant threat, it's a wave already building across the country. What happens when owning a home in Britain becomes a privilege only the wealthy can afford? The answer is closer than anyone dares to admit. Number 1. Rising interest rates, mortgage stress. The steady rise in interest rates has become one of the biggest threats to home ownership in Britain. After years of historically low borrowing costs, the Bank of England's tightening cycle has drastically increased monthly repayments for millions of households. Families who fixed their mortgage during the pandemic's low-rate era are now facing a painful reset as those deals expire. Many are discovering their repayments have doubled, eating into already fragile household budgets. Even those on tracker or variable rate mortgages feel the pressure instantly, watching their costs rise with every central bank decision. This squeeze is not just theoretical, it is visible in growing arrears data, mortgage defaults, and a surge in homeowners seeking financial advice. For middle-income earners, the jump in interest rates has turned stability into uncertainty almost overnight. The real danger lies in remortgaging cycles hitting their peak in 2026. An estimated 2 million households are set to refinance during that year, facing rates far above what they originally agreed to. For a homeowner who locked in a 1.5% rate 5 years ago, facing a 5.5% renewal could mean hundreds of extra pounds every month. That burden will be unbearable for many who are already contending with the cost of living crisis, stagnant wages, and rising taxes. When mortgage payments begin to exceed one's disposable income, repossession becomes a looming threat. The banks, under regulatory obligations, will not hesitate to reclaim properties once arrears accumulate, and this could unleash a new wave of forced sales across the UK housing market. This financial storm extends beyond individual households. It threatens the broader economy. Falling consumer confidence, combined with growing mortgage distress, creates a feedback loop that depresses spending and weakens local economies. Entire communities could feel the strain as once secure homeowners are forced to sell, flooding the market and potentially driving property values downward. For renters, the crisis trickles down too, as landlords pass higher mortgage costs onto tenants, making housing unaffordable across every income tier. With wages failing to keep pace with inflation and credit access tightening, 2026 could mark a turning point when mortgage stress transforms into a national housing emergency. The warning signs are already flashing red, and if rates remain high through next year, millions could find themselves priced out of their own homes, marking one of the harshest property corrections in recent British history. Number 2. Falling home values, housing market correction. After years of relentless price growth, the UK housing market is showing unmistakable signs of strain. Property values that once seemed unstoppable are now slipping in several regions, signaling the beginning of a market correction. Analysts from major banks warn that this downturn could deepen into 2026 as high mortgage rates choke demand and affordability collapses. Homeowners who stretched their finances to buy at peak prices now face the grim reality that their properties may soon be worth less than they paid. When the market cools rapidly, confidence evaporates, and both buyers and sellers retreat, leaving homes sitting unsold while valuations continue to fall. For first-time buyers who entered the market with minimal deposits, this creates a dangerous situation, owing more than their home's current value. This negative equity trap locks people in place, unable to move, remortgage, or sell without incurring devastating losses. The impact of falling home values goes far beyond the balance sheet. A property is not only an investment, but the foundation of financial security for millions of British families. As prices slide, the psychological and economic blow intensifies. People cut spending, delay major purchases, and reduce participation in the economy, deepening the slowdown. With the cost of essentials still high, the erosion of home equity removes a crucial safety net that many relied on for stability. At the same time, property developers have begun halting new projects due to declining demand, creating ripples across the construction sector. Job losses in building, real estate, and related industries are already being reported, amplifying the fear that a housing-led recession could return. The sentiment shift is palpable. What was once seen as the safest form of investment now feels uncertain and volatile. As 2026 approaches, the correction could accelerate. Analysts warn that if property values fall by even 10 to 15%, millions could face severe financial exposure, especially those with high loan-to-value mortgages. When a homeowner's debt exceeds their property's worth, lenders grow nervous, tightening credit conditions further. Combined with persistent inflation and interest rate pressure, this creates a vicious cycle of declining value and increasing risk. Entire neighborhoods could see a wave of forced sales as distressed owners rush to exit before prices fall further. What once felt like a wealth boom could soon turn into the largest property devaluation the UK has faced in over a decade, threatening the very stability of Britain's middle class. Number 3. High cost of living. Inflation squeeze. The cost of living crisis has evolved into a full-blown threat to homeownership across the United Kingdom. Prices for everyday necessities, food, fuel, transport, and energy remain stubbornly high, even as wage growth stagnates. For millions of households, this means that after covering basic expenses, little remains for mortgage payments or rent. The situation worsens each month as inflation silently erodes purchasing power, leaving many families forced to choose between heating their homes and paying their lenders. Inflation is not just a temporary phase, it has become embedded in nearly every aspect of daily life. Even with official inflation figures appearing to cool, core prices such as groceries and utilities continue to climb. This persistent squeeze means disposable income is shrinking faster than it can recover, turning financial security into a luxury that fewer Britons can afford. The strain on household budgets has already led to a surge in missed mortgage payments and growing debt among middle and lower income earners. Credit card balances are at record highs as families attempt to cover monthly shortfalls. For those who managed to buy homes during the era of cheap credit, the current economic climate feels like a trap. Higher costs on every front and no room left to adjust. Government energy support programs have ended, and new levies on utilities and property taxes add to the financial burden. Many homeowners find that even small, unexpected expenses can send them into arrears. Economists warn that by 2026, the combination of stagnant wages, rising interest rates, and relentless inflation could push a wave of households into default, triggering a new phase of repossessions that rivals the crises of past decades. This inflationary storm also deepens inequality. Wealthier households can absorb higher costs, and while lower earners, especially renters or those with large mortgages, bear the brunt of the shock. The ripple effect is devastating. As more people struggle to keep up, housing demand weakens, landlords raise rents to offset losses, and consumer confidence collapses. When essential goods cost more and paychecks buy less, financial resilience disappears, leaving families vulnerable to even minor disruptions. By 2026, the cost of living squeeze could become the tipping point that transforms financial hardship into widespread homelessness, with rising arrears, repossessions, and evictions spreading from cities to small towns. Without intervention, inflation may do what no single policy ever could: make home ownership unattainable for millions across Britain. Number 4. Energy debt, utility defaults. As Britain enters another year of volatile energy prices, energy debt has quietly become one of the most alarming financial burdens threatening homeowners. Households across the UK owe record amounts to suppliers, with millions already behind on gas and electricity bills. The surge began during the 2022 to 2023 energy crisis and has continued as suppliers pass on higher wholesale costs to consumers. Even with government caps and temporary relief schemes, the average household bill remains far above pre-pandemic levels. For many, this means they are paying hundreds of pounds more each month just to keep their lights on. As the debts grow, energy companies are tightening their collection efforts, installing prepayment meters, or referring accounts to enforcement agencies. Families that once prided themselves on staying financially stable are now receiving threatening letters, warning of disconnection or legal action. This situation has broader implications for the housing market itself. Rising utility debt often coincides with mortgage arrears, creating a compounded crisis that pushes homeowners into impossible situations. A family already stretched by a high mortgage rate can find themselves falling into default simply because their energy bills double during the winter. Energy debt can also affect credit ratings, reducing a homeowner's ability to refinance or negotiate better repayment terms with their lenders. For those on prepayment meters, running out of credit during cold months can be dangerous, particularly for elderly residents or families with children. Energy poverty is no longer confined to low-income households. It has entered the mainstream, affecting teachers, nurses, and small business owners alike. The human cost of this crisis is mounting quietly, yet its financial consequences are loud enough to echo through the entire economy. By 2026, experts fear that unresolved energy debt could act as a catalyst for mass displacement. If arrears remain unpaid, utility firms may escalate enforcement through the courts, and homeowners already on the edge could face repossession as their overall financial position collapses. Meanwhile, landlords burdened by their own rising utility expenses are likely to increase rents, worsening affordability for tenants. The knock-on effects will ripple through communities, forcing vulnerable households to choose between paying for power or keeping a roof over their heads. Without stronger regulatory intervention and targeted relief, energy debt could become the silent force that pushes millions of Britons out of their homes, turning a utility crisis into a national housing disaster. Number 5. Cuts in supported housing. Social housing collapse. Britain's supported housing sector, once a vital safety net for vulnerable people, is now standing on the edge of financial collapse. Local authorities and housing associations are warning that budget shortfalls and rising operational costs are making it impossible to maintain existing services. These facilities, which provide homes for the elderly, disabled and low-income families, are struggling under the combined weight of inflation, staff shortages and years of underfunding. Many providers have already reduced capacity or shut down entirely, leaving thousands without stable accommodation. For people dependent on social housing, every closure means longer waiting lists and growing desperation. Some councils are forced to place families in temporary shelters or hotels, burning through limited resources while failing to offer permanent homes. This slow unraveling of the public housing system is setting the stage for a national displacement crisis that could peak in 2026. The consequences of these cuts extend far beyond those living in subsidized homes. When social housing capacity shrinks, pressure spills over into the private rental market, driving up demand and costs. Low-income tenants are pushed into bidding wars for substandard accommodation, while middle-income renters compete for what little remains affordable. The resulting surge in rents leaves many people paying unsustainable proportions of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. For homeowners already struggling with mortgages, this also removes the fallback option of renting, trapping them in financial limbo. Meanwhile, government initiatives to expand affordable housing construction have fallen behind schedule, hindered by planning delays, labor shortages, and material costs. The absence of a strong public housing framework leaves millions exposed to market volatility with nowhere else to turn. As 2026 approaches, the collapse of social housing could act as the final trigger that pushes thousands into homelessness. Charities warn that emergency shelters are already reaching capacity and will be unable to cope with another wave of displaced families. Those who lose supported housing often end up in precarious private rentals or on the streets, with little chance of recovery. The loss of these homes also erodes community stability, as vulnerable residents are uprooted from neighborhoods where they once had support networks. Without immediate investment and policy reform, Britain risks turning its housing shortage into a full-blown humanitarian crisis. One where affordable housing no longer exists, and the very concept of a guaranteed home becomes a privilege rather than a right. Number 6. Regulatory burdens, cladding crisis costs. Thousands of homeowners across Britain remain trapped in the aftermath of the cladding and building safety crisis, facing massive bills for repairs they did not cause. Following the Grenfell Tower tragedy, new regulations were introduced to ensure fire safety compliance in high-rise buildings. While these reforms were essential for public safety, they placed an enormous financial burden on leaseholders, many of whom are ordinary working people. For years, residents in affected buildings have lived under constant fear, not only of fire hazards but of financial ruin. They have been told to pay tens or even hundreds of thousands of pounds for remediation work, fire safety certificates, and insurance premiums that have skyrocketed overnight. Many properties are now effectively unsellable, trapping owners in mortgage limbo with no way to move or refinance. Some have declared bankruptcy, others are forced to continue paying for homes that have lost most of their market value. This issue has evolved into one of the most damaging examples of regulatory overreach without financial protection. Despite multiple government promises and funding pledges, delays and bureaucratic confusion have left thousands waiting for relief. Building owners and developers often evade responsibility, leaving leaseholders to shoulder costs that should have been covered by those at fault. The emotional toll is immense. Families living in unsafe homes, unable to escape or improve their circumstances, while being drained by relentless financial demands. Even new constructions are not immune, as stricter post-Grenfell requirements increase costs for developers, leading them to pass these expenses to future buyers. The result is a housing system where compliance becomes a luxury, and where safety improvements paradoxically push people closer to homelessness. By 2026, as deadlines for full remediation approach, many buildings will face final enforcement actions, triggering catastrophic financial consequences. Owners unable to pay will risk forfeiting their leases, and mortgage lenders may begin calling in debts on non-compliant properties. Entire blocks could fall into insolvency, leaving residents evicted from homes they technically still own. Insurance companies, wary of liability, have already begun refusing coverage for high-risk structures, making them practically uninhabitable. The cladding crisis has turned into a national symbol of policy failure, a reminder that regulation without protection can destroy lives as thoroughly as negligence. If the government fails to deliver a sustainable rescue plan soon, thousands could lose their homes not through choice or recklessness, but through a system that punished them for demanding safety. Number 7. Insufficient new home supply construction bottlenecks. The United Kingdom's chronic housing shortage has reached a critical point, and by 2026 it threatens to spiral into a structural collapse. Successive governments have promised to build hundreds of thousands of new homes each year, yet those targets remain consistently unmet. The reasons are complex. Restrictive planning laws, labor shortages, environmental constraints, and rising material costs have all conspired to slow progress. Developers have also become increasingly hesitant as high interest rates and falling demand reduce profitability. As a result, construction activity has dropped to its lowest level in years. This shortage of new housing keeps prices artificially high even as the economy cools, creating a paradox where fewer people can afford to buy but costs refuse to fall meaningfully. The imbalance between supply and demand now defines the UK market, ensuring that housing affordability worsens every year. Behind the statistics lies a growing human crisis. Young adults are stuck living with parents well into their 30s, couples postpone starting families, and renters see their income swallowed by ever-rising costs. Builders, facing tighter credit and slower sales, have begun shelving projects mid-development, leaving half-finished estates across suburban England. Local councils, already under financial strain, are unable to approve or support large-scale developments due to inadequate infrastructure funding. Even where land is available, outdated regulations and resistance from existing residents slow down approvals. Meanwhile, the Greenbelt restrictions, while environmentally vital, severely limit expansion near major employment hubs. The result is a perfect gridlock. Demand continues to climb, yet the pipeline for affordable homes remains choked. Every delay compounds the problem. Turns in what was once a supply issue into a nationwide affordability catastrophe. If construction levels remain stagnant through 2026, analysts warn that the housing deficit could exceed 2 million homes, an unprecedented shortfall. This shortage will intensify competition, pushing both renters and buyers to bid far beyond their means. As a result, millions risk over-leveraging themselves just to secure a property, setting the stage for future defaults. Those unable to buy are trapped in rental markets where prices rise faster than wages. Homelessness rates are already creeping upward, particularly among working families who no longer qualify for social housing. The lack of supply is not just an economic problem, it's a social fracture that threatens the stability of communities. Without decisive investment and reform, Britain's construction stagnation could make the dream of homeownership vanish entirely for an entire generation. Number 8. Local authority, failures, infrastructure, breakdown. The decline of local councils and essential infrastructure has become an overlooked yet critical driver of the housing crisis. Across the UK, dozens of councils are nearing financial collapse, unable to meet even basic service obligations. Years of budget cuts, mismanagement, and rising operational costs have left many local authorities effectively bankrupt. When councils fail, everything connected to housing suffers. Planning approvals stall, maintenance of public spaces halts, and critical services such as waste management, water, and transportation deteriorate. This breakdown makes communities less livable and drives property values down. At the same time, councils have reduced or eliminated housing support programs that once helped struggling families avoid eviction. For homeowners already under stress, this collapse of local governance adds another layer of vulnerability. Areas once considered stable are now seeing rising blight, declining infrastructure, and a growing sense of neglect that fuels economic flight and property devaluation. The infrastructure bottleneck is equally destructive. Water companies and energy networks are operating far beyond capacity, and outdated systems are delaying new housing developments. In several regions, planning applications for thousands of homes are frozen due to sewage and water treatment limits, leaving developers unable to build despite high demand. Public transport networks, especially in smaller towns and rural counties, are also deteriorating, isolating residents from work opportunities and essential services. When infrastructure collapses, so does confidence, both from homebuyers and investors. The lack of reliable services forces many to move away, leaving behind hollowed-out communities and vacant properties that rapidly lose value. The cumulative effect of these failures is not immediately visible but grows quietly, weakening the foundation on which sustainable housing depends. By 2026, experts warn that the financial insolvency of local governments could ignite a new phase of housing instability. As councils sell off public assets to stay afloat, affordable housing stock will shrink even further. Developers, discouraged by bureaucratic paralysis and decaying local infrastructure, will redirect investment elsewhere, deepening regional inequality. Residents in struggling towns may face falling property values so steep that selling becomes impossible, trapping them in areas without services or prospects. Meanwhile, urban centres burdened by failing utilities could see housing costs soar as capacity dwindles. Britain's housing crisis is not just about mortgages or rents, it is about the slow disintegration of the systems that make a community livable. If local governance continues to crumble, millions may find that the homes they own are no longer worth living in. Number 9. Rising taxes, fiscal pressure on homeowners. Britain's fiscal landscape is tightening rapidly, and homeowners are finding themselves at the centre of the storm. To stabilize public finances after years of borrowing and inflationary spending, the government is turning to property owners for additional revenue. Council tax revaluations, higher stamp duties, and expanding environmental levies are already being rolled out in many regions. These measures might appear modest individually, but combined, they represent a significant financial hit to millions of households. Homeowners now face the reality of paying more just to stay in their own homes, even as wages stagnate and mortgage costs rise. For families operating on tight budgets, these incremental increases feel like a relentless squeeze. Every month brings new bills, property maintenance, insurance premiums, and taxes that grow faster than income. The result is a silent erosion of financial stability, pushing many toward default or forced sales simply to escape the weight of ever-rising property obligations. The impact extends far beyond individual households. As taxes rise and disposable income shrinks, consumer spending, the backbone of local economies, contracts sharply. Retailers, small businesses, and service industries feel the ripple effect as homeowners cut back on everything from renovations to basic leisure. For landlords, new taxes on rental income and energy efficiency requirements are driving many to sell their properties altogether, reducing available rentals and pushing rents higher. Simultaneously, middle-income earners who once relied on modest property portfolios for retirement security are being taxed out of viability. The government's push for fiscal recovery, though intended to balance national accounts, is inadvertently worsening the housing affordability crisis. By 2026, analysts fear this tax-driven pressure could become one of the leading causes of mass displacement across the UK. What makes this threat particularly severe is its cumulative nature. Unlike a sudden economic shock, fiscal tightening works slowly, stripping away savings and resilience year after year. Property owners facing higher taxes, insurance premiums, and compliance costs may eventually be forced to sell into a declining market, amplifying downward pressure on house prices. Those unable to sell will fall into arrears, risking repossession. Meanwhile, first-time buyers will find ownership increasingly unreachable as transaction costs escalate. Without targeted relief or tax restructuring, millions of Britons could find themselves priced out of home ownership not by market forces alone, but by their own government's fiscal policies. The dream of owning a stable home is at risk of turning into an expensive liability by 2026. Number 10. Economic recession, rising unemployment. The looming threat of a UK recession by 2026 represents perhaps the most immediate danger to home ownership. Economic growth has already slowed to a crawl, and multiple indicators suggest the country is heading toward a prolonged downturn. Manufacturing output is shrinking, consumer spending is falling, and business confidence remains weak. The job market, once resilient, is beginning to fracture under pressure from automation, outsourcing, and global instability. Thousands of workers in retail, transport, and construction have already seen hours reduced or contracts terminated. When unemployment rises, the impact on the housing market is swift and brutal. Families dependent on two incomes suddenly face the loss of one, and those living paycheck to paycheck have no cushion left. Missed mortgage payments soon turn into arrears, and within months, repossession notices begin to appear. The link between job loss and housing loss is direct, and it is tightening with every passing quarter. This potential recession carries unique risks because it is converging with an already fragile financial environment. Homeowners burdened by high mortgage rates, energy debt, and inflation will find themselves especially vulnerable once their incomes fall. Many who barely managed to stay afloat during the cost of living crisis will have no room left to adjust. Government support programs have been scaled back, and banks, wary of rising defaults, are becoming less flexible with repayment holidays or restructuring offers. As companies downsize, the knock-on effects ripple through local economies. Fewer jobs mean fewer buyers, and fewer buyers mean declining home values. The result is a vicious economic feedback loop in which unemployment drives foreclosures. Foreclosures depress property prices, and falling prices deepen the recession further. If forecasts prove accurate, 2026 could witness the largest surge in housing repossession since the global financial crisis. Renters too will suffer, as landlords pass on their own rising costs or sell properties entirely, leaving tenants without security. The emotional toll will be immense. Families uprooted, savings erased, and decades of effort lost to economic forces beyond their control. Once confidence disappears, recovery becomes slow and painful, especially if credit markets freeze again. For millions of Britons, even a brief recession could mean the permanent loss of their homes, pushing the dream of ownership out of reach for years to come. Unless decisive measures are taken to protect employment and stabilize income, job losses may become the spark that ignites a full-scale housing collapse across the United Kingdom. The warning lights are flashing across Britain's housing landscape. Every layer of the system, mortgages, energy, taxes, construction and jobs, is tightening around households already on edge. What began as a slow financial squeeze has evolved into a national emergency where even stable families face the risk of losing everything. If current trends continue, 2026 could mark the moment when home ownership in the United Kingdom shifts from being a symbol of security to a story of survival. The question is no longer if the crisis will hit, but how hard it will strike and who will be left standing afterward. Behind every statistic lies a human story. Families packing boxes, empty streets in once thriving suburbs, children leaving the only homes they've ever known. It's a quiet catastrophe that grows louder every month. But awareness is power, and understanding these pressures is the first step toward protecting your future. Watch the signals, demand accountability, and plan for resilience before the system breaks completely. If this video opened your eyes to the coming storm, don't look away now. Subscribe for more in-depth reports on Britain's unfolding housing crisis and the global forces shaping your financial future. Share this video to spread awareness. Someone you know might already be on the edge without realizing it. Comment below with your thoughts or personal experiences and join the discussion as we uncover what's really happening behind the headlines. Together, we can expose the truth before it's too late.